Hi, I'm Femi OK. Welcome to the stream. Did I ever mention that I used to be a weather forecaster? Yeah, I know, once or twice. When I was back in the day forecasting weather, I would often talk about an urban heat island effect, and that's where a city radiates much more heat than the areas around it. That's because we as people, we create a lot of heat, we use machinery, the buildings exude heat as well. That is an urban heat island effect. In the next 30 years, there are about 1,000 cities that are expected to experience extreme heat waves. We're going to find out why and then what we do about it in this edition of The Stream. We start with Edith de Guzman, who has a very good question. Edith.
So what's causing extreme heat in cities around the world, and why is it worsening? Well, we know that we have a changing climate, but in addition to this, we also have made modifications to the urban environment. We have buildings and roads and parking lots, and those all absorb heat during the day and release it at night. We also have a lack of trees and other vegetation that would otherwise provide shade and evaporative cooling. And finally, we produce our own heat in cities. We have air conditioners, cars, and other engines and machinery, which generate heat and increase the temperature. We also use more of that air conditioning when it's hot out, so we contribute to the problem by releasing more climate-changing emissions into the atmosphere.
We're discussing extreme heat in cities. What would you like to add to our conversation? You can be in our conversation right here in the comments section on YouTube. So joining us to discuss this issue from Freetowns, Sierra Leone, the city's chief heat officer, Eugenia Kagbo. From New Delhi, India, Aditya Valitan Pillai, a fellow at the Centre for Policy Research. And also joining us, we have Christina Wiedebro. She's the chief heat officer at Santiago in Chile. Hello, welcome everybody. This is a tough subject to talk about because there are a lot of people who don't realise how incredibly important it is. It's a life and death situation for many of us around the world. Eugenia, first of all, a chief heat officer, what do they do? That's your job title.
Thank you, Femi. First of all, that's a question I get asked all the time. What is a chief heat officer and what do you do? Well, my role is a local role, and the chief heat officer role is part of an initiative that is driven by the Ashbrook Resilience Center and the Atlantic Council in partnership with cities because of the challenges that cities are facing in terms of extreme heat. And so my role is to work with local leaders and national government to ensure that we find and implement solutions that are locally led to ensure that we mitigate and help the most vulnerable within a society to adapt to extreme heat.
Christina,
so that's the role.
Yeah, Christina, you're doing a very similar role on the other side of the world from where Eugenia is. What keeps you up at night? What is your biggest challenge?
Wow, it's first of all, well, thank you for having me. And first of all, is to ensure to have the agenda in place to connect with the authorities and all the decision makers in order to actually implement the extreme heat agenda. It's like, I feel like if we don't act today, it's impossible to ensure a future for our children in the future. So it's a really urgent agenda. And I'm glad I'm doing it with other CHOs like Eugenia. We are a network of all-female CHOs in eight cities now. And it has been such a great opportunity to learn from each other, to learn best practices, things like that. So it's a great opportunity to have this role.
Let's talk about the issue in a very practical way. Aditya, can you give us an example from India, literally from the past month or so, where extreme heat has been deadly?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Femi. Yeah, we've actually had a couple of incidents in the last few weeks alone. There was an incident in one of the suburbs of Mumbai where 13 people died at a gathering, at a social gathering. And this was actually one of the first times we saw a large-scale loss of life exclusively due to heat, attributed to heat. And just yesterday, again, we saw a tribal woman who was 9 months pregnant, walking, looking for a hospital, and had to walk about 7 kilometers and died in the process. So these are very tragic stories and affect the people that are most vulnerable to it, and often the people who have absolutely no protection to heat.
I'm just looking at a tweet, a series of tweets about how heat waves are increasing in Chile. Stats sometimes can be a little bit like, oh, okay, another stat. But it's changed, the weather has changed, the heat has changed so much, Christina. Can you give us an example of how much to change and what have you noticed in the past decade or so?
Yes, actually, that tweet was because we are in the 7th heat wave of the year and we are in the fall. We're not supposed to have this type of heat. We have like a couple of days ago, it was like 29 degrees Celsius, and that's a lot for this season. And what we've seen is like, of course, climate is changing, but in the last 20 years, we had, for example, the last 20 years, we had 45 heat waves. And the last decade, we doubled that, and we had 84. So it's like increasing rapidly, and people is feeling it. It's about not only the extreme temperatures, but also the minimums have been rising, and the length of the heat waves are being increasing as well. So we had really, really long heat waves, with really concerning temperatures. So, of course, we have the data, but also people are feeling it these days.
When do you start panicking, Christina?
Yeah.
So what?
When do you say, yeah, that would be my reaction as well. When do you start panicking?
I would say today, like right now, yesterday, actually, because, and I think that's our role with Eugenia and the other CHOs, is about telling people, like, when they say, this heat, I'm dying, this heat is too much. Actually, that's a fact. That might happen if you don't take measures. And nobody has to die from extreme heat. It's so easy to protect people only with drinking water, like rest and seeking shade. So it's actually kind of an easy disaster to address. And the only thing we need to do, not the only, but one of the things we need to do is actually inform people about this. And of course, then implement the rest of the agenda. But information is key here.
Yeah.
Christina, could I jump in?
Aditya, you go first. Eugenia, you go second. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that, Eugenia. But no, I just wanted to add, 7 heat waves. That's quite incredible. It's so striking how similar it is to the story in India in terms of record-breaking heat waves. This February was the hottest on record. Last year, we had the hottest March on record. Lost, 5 to 10% of India's wheat crop just as the war in Ukraine was kicking off. And so India had to cut off its wheat exports, and that led to a global spike in wheat. And it's a pan-India phenomenon, right? So 3/4 of the country's geographic area was hit by heat wave at some point or the other last year. So it's just striking how, it's South Asia and South America, but it's so incredibly similar in terms of like the dire effects of this.
Go ahead, Eugenia.
So it's almost, Femi, it's almost the same experience that we having here in Freetown. And the past 3 weeks have been very critical for residents in Freetown as we've been experiencing intense and prolonged heat waves. Over the past 20 years, we've seen the population of the city expand. And this is as a result of urbanization, but also a combination of climate factors. Majority of the people living in the rural areas are farmers, and most of them are women. And we've seen extreme heat badly affecting the agricultural sector, leading to crop failure and low income levels. And so a lot of people are moving into the city. And the way geographically that Freetown is built, it's beautiful, but also a challenge because it's located and surrounded around hills and valleys. So as the city expands, we've experienced massive deforestation of the hillsides, but also the marine ecosystem. And so that has led to several climate vulnerabilities such as landslides and mudslides in 2017. 1,000 people lost their lives in a single day, and plus 3,000 lost their homes in a single day. Yeah. And the problem that we have in Freetown when compared to other cities, when you look at the temperatures, it's around the highest maximum temperature is around 35 degrees Celsius. And when you compare that to Chile or India, you'll say, oh, temperatures are low. But the build-up environment and the context within Freetown is what makes it critical.
Also, what you're used to, temperatures aren't a temperature in one part of the world would feel quite cold in another part of the world. So it's also, what are you used to? What is your environment like? Eugenia, pause for a moment, because we're also getting some feedback from our audience who are watching online on YouTube. Cities are being mentioned: Jaipur in India, communities in Iran, Morocco, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, all experiencing extreme heat. But what I love about our guest today, and this topic is, no one needs to die because of extreme heat in cities. There are so many ways to counteract it and to create shade. I want to take you to somewhere, Eugenia knows this very well, and it's become a really great phrase: Freetown, Tree Town in Sierra Leone. Let's have a look. This is what the mayor of Freetown has to say about this project.
Freetown, the Tree Town, is our city's ambitious plan to plant 1 million trees over 2 rainy seasons. But we're not just planting trees, we're growing them, which means communities are involved, which means we're tracking them, which means we're monitoring their growth, and we're bringing new life to hillsides, to mangroves, to forested areas. 1 million trees will not fix climate change, but it will reduce flooding and landslides. It will ensure that we bring back biodiversity into our cities. It'll ensure that the mangrove areas where our fishes are spawned are restored. It will really make a significant impact.
Every single one of the guests are nodding. Trees are the answer, including Joanna Frank, who joins us an extra voice in our conversation. So we've heard about the problems and the degree of the extreme temperatures around many cities in the world. And Joanna says, well, okay, this is what we need to do about it. Here she is.
Every year, high temperatures account for more than 350,000 deaths globally, and further pose a threat to health by increasing the likelihood of extreme weather, poor air quality, flooding, and damage to vulnerable infrastructure. All of these risk factors have a measurable impact on our health and the health of our communities. However, one effective strategy that we can all use within our cities is to plant more street trees. Dense tree canopy is a valuable defense against rising temperatures and could prevent up to 1/3 of those heat-related deaths. However, we need to act quickly because we are losing 36 million trees per year.
All right, Eugenia, very briefly, explain why a tree is the answer, because if you're planting a little sapling like this, that is not going to help, right? And you can't just plant and leave it. It's 2 or 3 decades worth of attention for that tree for it actually to be able to save us, which is exact time span when our cities are going to be extremely hot. So what's the point of a little tree? How's that going to help?
Trees has a lot to do in our environment. First of all, our very existence depends on trees. We give out CO2 and we breathe in oxygen, and the oxygen is coming from the trees. They help protect the environment. So first of all, in terms of the tree planting strategy, the reason why we've been very successful is because we are deliberate. We are deliberate in planting, but also deliberate in growing and ensuring that we're tracking the trees for sustainability. Yes, we know that we're going to take a while to get the effect that we need, the desired results, the shading that we need from trees. But they play a very big role in terms of stabilizing, destabilized and degraded.
Actually, I copy
Yeah, Christina, go on, join in.
No,
Excuse us,
it's
Eugenia.
like, sorry, I get excited listening Eugenia, because when I first heard about the Freetown program, actually we copied it. We did the same thing. It's not the same because we don't have the same tagline, of course, but we decided to go with trees as well. So we are planting trees in Santiago, but they're not a million. It's way more less than that, but we are doing the challenge of planting them on the streets, like where people are going to need them to shop in the next 50, 100 years, and people go to walk and recreate. So it's a huge challenge because we're not putting them in parks, which might be easier. We're putting them on where it used to be cement or used to be like a sidewalk. So it's expensive, it's tricky, but we were convinced that we need to do that in order to have our way of life for the future.
Aditya, I'm just wondering, go ahead, share your thoughts with us.
Sorry, I'll just quickly jump in on the tree point.
Yeah.
One of the things that one notices in cities in the global south, definitely cities in India, is that there are massive inequities when it comes to shade. Right, so usually the low rent, low cost neighborhood will be drenched in concrete and have absolutely no shade, and those are the people that need it the most. And so there's active decision making that governments need to do about where to invest these trees, even if you only start seeing results in 10, 20 years, like you said.
I'm just going to go to YouTube just briefly because we're getting suggestions from our audience who are watching on YouTube. So Brent says, painting surfaces white. Brent, did you see what I had lined up to share with our audience? Or we're just on the same wavelength here? Because painting surfaces white really helps. I'm going to take you to a project in New Delhi and you can hear a little bit more about it because we have so many ways of counteracting extreme heat in cities. Painting areas white is one of them. Have a look.
MST के थ्रू हम बहनों के लिए बहुत सारे काम करते हैं, बट उसमें से हम एक काम ये भी समझ सकते हैं क्योंकि यहाँ गर्मी आने वाली है तो कई बहनें ऐसे बोलती हैं, दीदी हमारी छत बहुत तपती है, हमें बहुत गर्मी लगती है। कई बहनें ऐसी हैं जिनके पास कूलर भी नहीं है, पंखे भी नहीं हैं यहाँ पर। पेंट कराने का मेन उद्देश्य तो ये था कि सर यहाँ पे गर्मी ज़्यादा होती है, एक तो खुला वातावरण है, यहाँ पे देख लीजिए साइड में मतलब कुछ बना हुआ भी नहीं है, धूप सीधी डायरेक्टली आ रही है। और यहाँ पर दूसरी चीज़ ये है कि घर में जो घर बने हैं, पास घर बने, तो यहाँ पर हवा भी जल्दी से नहीं आती है। यदि लाइट चली जाए तो यहाँ के लोगों को घर में रहना बहुत दिक्कत देता है। और यदि इस पेंट की वजह से लगता है कि हाँ नीचे जो बहन रह रही हैं, कि यदि उनको कुछ राहत मिलेगी गर्मी से तो बहुत बेटर होगा।
Aditya, there's this movement, this trend to have chief heat officers who are planning for areas to be more prone to heat waves. India is one of those regions, a country that will be prone to more heat waves, but you don't have a single chief heat officer. That's deeply problematic, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's actually great to be in this conversation and hear about what chief heat officers are doing. Yeah. I've heard of plans of instituting chief heat positions, but it's a very new governance phenomenon, right? It's only a couple of years old. But hugely promising, it looks like, because to have one person manage the entire heat portfolio, which stretches across so many different departments. One of the big problems we find in most Indian governance contexts is that there's no single entity that's responsible for heat, right? The impacts on agriculture, the impacts on water, the impacts on the built environment, and all of these things belong to completely different departments. So eminently useful to have all of this concentrated in one portfolio.
I'm going to share some of Christina at work. Christina, this is your Santiago heat protocol here, explaining what is going on in the plan. That looks like a really thick brochure. And then also talking about some of the methods and processes of reducing the heat in Santiago. This comes from actually acknowledging that there is going to be a problem, that there is a problem already. And so you need buy-in from local government, from federal government as well. Otherwise, what do people do? They can't do things by themselves, can they?
Of course. Actually, I'm happy that we have our first protocol. We launched it last December, and it's a simple one. But the idea was to install the importance of having a protocol to embrace the extreme heat agenda. And I'm so happy, and it makes my job easier that I have full support of our regional governor, Claudio Rego, because having actually leadership support is key in addressing climate change and extreme heat. So because you need to negotiate with other agencies, you need to communicate to the public the measures that you are taking, and that needs a lot of technical expertise, but also a lot of political support. So we have that, and we have our first protocol within the first year of our since I became a CHO. So I'm happy that we did that.
Eugenia, oh yes, go ahead, Aditya. Go ahead.
Sorry, but no, I just want to add one important point about this is, with the protocols and so many different actions and solutions, cool roofs, trees, and so on, all of it requires money. And we sort of looked across heat action plans across the world, heat action plans in India. And one thing we've sort of consistently noticed is that heat funding is very scarcely available because it's such a new area of public policy. And it's only now gaining attention through the media, through heat waves, and through these through public communication from governments. So that's just one area of focus for the next 5-10 years, I suspect.
Eugenia, I want to bring in one more. Let me just bring in one more voice here, and this is the voice of Lawrence. Lawrence spoke to us a little bit earlier. He's studying at the University of Nairobi, but he's a Nigerian, and he listed some of the major issues that Nigeria has. And I know, Eugenia, one of the ways that you work is, what can we do together? Have a listen to Lawrence, then immediately off the back, what can we do together? Here's Lawrence.
We see that within the country today, we experience increased frequency and intensity of heat waves, and this largely affects human health, agriculture, and the natural ecosystems. Many communities across the countries have reported different heat-related illnesses such as strokes, stress, dehydration, agitation, exhaustion, and also discomfort recorded particularly among children, elderly, and those living with underlying health conditions. More so, extreme heat threatens food security within the country as crops and livestock often die due to high temperature.
Eugenia, go ahead. What can we do together?
So as you said, it needs to be a collective effort. We need to work together. And communities are part of the problem and must be part of the solution. So as we are working together to build plans, we also need to ensure that we bring in the communities along. We need to ensure that we increase awareness around why this is happening, what are the risks, and what can we do together to protect the environment. But also at the national level, we need to be deliberate in driving sustainable solutions across the city. We need to ensure that we are implementing policies and enforcing laws that will ensure sustainability. And at the global level, as my colleague here said, we need to ensure that there is finance available to do all this beautiful work and planning that we've done in different spaces.
I want to tell you, guests, that your conversation has inspired a lot of ideas from our audience as well about passing local laws, about what should be constructed and how it should be constructed, buildings designed with coverings and shade as well, and also remembering that mosques and churches and temples are often places where you can actually get respite from the heat, water and shade as well. Thank you, Christina, Aditya, Eugenia as well, for coming to our show, talking about the climate crisis, but also bringing plenty of solutions as well, to remind us from the very beginning of the show when you told us nobody needs to die because of extreme heat. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. YouTube viewers, thank you for joining us. I will see you next time on The Stream. Take care, everybody.